Shalom Yashrallah. Shalom Yahawada. Brother Malak back with the biblical lesson breakdown. Something quick and mighty in the spirit. Whenever the spirit, rolls down, so to speak. This one is going to be titled Surprise, Surprise. The so-called Africans were in fact Hebrew Israelites. Surprise, surprise. The so-called Africans were in fact Hebrew Israelites. We're going to listen to a quick doc, run some prophecy, and continue to do the ministry work via these digital epistles. I want to give all glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rakakadash, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Kahalam La Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai. Like I say all the time in these lessons, no mortal can stop prophecy. No mortal can stop prophecy. What's going to happen is going to happen. Just like the Israelites couldn't stop the inevitable, these heathen nations, these Gentile nations, and you 2/3, you wicked Israelites, you won't stop the inevitable, because prophecy is prophecy. So this quick doc is going to key in on a couple points and make some extra points at that, because contrary to unpopular belief, the so-called Native Americans, the copper-colored, woolly hair, the people that was here in America when Christopher Columbus settled here in the new land, Turtle Island. Contrary to unpopular belief, the so-called Native Americans are Hebrew Israelites as well. They're from the certain tribes as well, and it's actually found in Second Esdras chapter 13 on down, where it states that the 10 tribes that made their way to the New World, which is quote unquote America, quote unquote Turtle Island, quote unquote the land of the North. This land, as you know it, which is through prophecy identified as Babylon. Babylon. And their scholars, they know this. They have their scholars on the left-hand side, and they have their sorcerers and different means of ways to filter out the truth and information. The artifacts, the manuscripts, and like I said earlier, prophecy. No mortal can stop prophecy. Rich, poor, handsome, ugly, beautiful, pretty, short, tall, fat, sick, healthy, in the burbs, in the slums, wherever you are, wherever you may go, no mortal can stop prophecy. Prophecy is prophecy. And Yahweh has awakened certain men out of these tribes to reveal the truth and to teach the truth and to basically seal the elect. Because Yahweh, another contrary to unpopular belief, Yahweh doesn't want everybody. All you niggas is not going. All you niggas is not going. And I hate to say it like that, but sometimes you got to say it like that because Jake needs to hear it like that. All of you niggas is not getting on those spaceships, those chariots. 2/3 will be battered through here in Babylon. Nuclear fire, chariot fire, missile fire. But it's astounding how everything just lines up, and how everything just continues to line up. Prophecy, prophecy, prophecy. So let's get into the short doc real quick. I only want key points, kind of skimmer through it. You know, the so-called Africans, we are, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And we make up the three tribes, which is Judah, which consists of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Those tribes consist of who the world calls, quote unquote Africans. From the lands of Nigeria, from the lands of Ghana, from the lands of Uganda, from the lands of really scattered all over, as Yahweh said that he would do to the Israelites. He will scatter us everywhere to the four corners. But that prophecy is really fulfilled on that western hemisphere of Africa, as far as the southern kingdom goes. There's a thing called the Judah slave port. It's called the Judah slave port, and this is where the so-called Arabs, Ishmaelites, they are considered, not even considered, they are the Ishmaelites, so-called Arabs, and the so-called Caucasians, which is the Edomites, the Ishmaelites and the Edomites. This is where they conspired against the so-called Israelites, which consist of you Negroes, Native Indians. Let's get into it.
Slavery, the treatment of human beings as property, deprived of personal rights, has occurred in many forms throughout the world. But one institution stands out for both its global scale and its lasting legacy.
Numbers involved in the Atlantic slave trade are truly staggering. From 1500 to 1880 CE, somewhere between 10 and 12 million African slaves were forcibly moved from Africa to the Americas, and about 15% of those people died during the journey.
The majority of enslaved Africans were taken from 6 primary regions: Senegambia, Sierra Leone and the Windward Coast, the Gold Coast, the Bada Benin, the Bada Biafra, and West Central Africa, also known as Congo and Angola. An estimated 12.4 million people were loaded onto slave ships and carried through what became known as the Middle Passage, which moved across the Atlantic and included many different destinations.
Once in the Americas, the surviving slaves were sold at a market very similar to the way cattle.
12.4 million Israelites. They call them Africans, but they're really Israelites. We're really the Israelites, the Hebrew Israelites, a royal, regal people, the people of who you call God. So they say 12.4, and that's just 12.4 on this particular matter as far as the transatlantic slave trade go. But you have to realize that you had other slave trades. You had the Silk Road slave trade. You had the sub-Saharan slave trade. And then you had a couple more. This is just the transatlantic slave trade. So it really runs, prophecy really runs deep. Let's pick it up and carry on.
After purchased, slave owners would often brand their new possession on the cheeks, again, just as they would do with cattle. The lives of slaves were dominated by work and terror.
The idea that I am not human, that I have no soul, that I am a beast. Brand me, burn me, whatever, and no recourse. Nothing. The history of humanity is filled with oppression, dominance, war, and slavery. Since the beginning of time, people in different parts of the world have forced their fellow humans into slavery. The tale of the Atlantic slave trade is the history of millions of Africans who were forced out of their communities by European slave traders and shipped across the Atlantic in conditions of great cruelty. When Portugal and Spain started conquering and establishing colonies in the New World in the early 1500s, they forcefully made the Indians work their plantations. However, European diseases and the violence of conquest led to the death of many of the Indian slaves. This led to a late...
So, as you just heard the narrator state, the Edomites, they first enslaved the Northern Kingdom, you know, the so-called Native Americans, Indians, Latins, Latinos, you know, so-called, you know, Indians, Native Americans, Native Indians. The Edomites enslaved them first. A lot of Israelites don't realize that that the Northern Kingdom was in captivity first before, you know, before, well, as far as the New World go. As far as the New World go, you know, finger quotations. As far as the New World go, finger quotations. The Northern Kingdom was in captivity, and you know they some of those tribes, I strongly believe, and Esau, Edom, you know, they brought, you know, different diseases and different things. This is what the narrator is stating. This is history. It's nothing but history. History, history, history. One of my favorite subjects too, history.
Shortage in Europe and made the Europeans look towards Africa for a solution as voyages to Africa progressed.
So they went to the western part of Africa, which on this end, this is where the Hebrew Israelites, the southern kingdom, was located. Because, you know, you still have the Hamites, the Hamitic nations. You got the Hamitic nations, which are the other African tribes, but you have to realize that we're two different people, two different skulls, structures, two different spirits, two different vibes, and they also sold the Israelites, the nation of Ham, the nation of Ishmael, and the nation of Edom. They all conspired against the Israelites. As a matter of fact, the spirit say, "Grab this." So let's obey the spirit and grab the prophecy. Let's grab Psalms. Just history, man. History, history, history. Nothing but some history. I mean, that's really what this ministry is about anyway. Bringing up the history, bringing up the facts, bringing up the residuals, so to speak, bringing up the receipts, so to speak, tying in prophecy, tying in future eschatology, and secular history. That's really what this thing is about. Psalms 83, and tied it in to biblical spiritual prophecy. Psalms 83, 1-6, it says, keep not thou silence, O Yahweh. Hold not thy peace and be not still, O Yahweh. It says, for lo, thy enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head, and they have taken crafty counsel. That's the point in this chapter. These nations, these heathen nations, have taken crafty counsel against the chosen, royal, regal people. chiefly the people of who you call God, the Israelites. It says, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Yashra'Allah in the Paleo Hebrew, but it says Israel, may be no more in remembrance. This is why you dummies call yourself African Americans. You dummies call yourself black. You dummies call yourself a hood nigga, or this nigga, or that nigga, and everything else. You're Muslim, you're Christian, you're that, you're yada, you're blaza, you're this. And it's all prophecy, because Yahweh said that the Israelites will lose their way because of what our forefathers and foremothers did as well, transgressing the laws and going off. So it's not to, well, it is. I mean, the heathens, you will get the blame for the most part. You Gentile nations, you heathen nations will get the blame for the most part, at least 90% of it. But the other 10%, or if I want to go with 80%, the rest of the 20% is on the Israelites for going off. And you know what? A Edomite woman actually told me that too. We was out a couple summers ago preaching and teaching, and the Edomite woman actually told me that. And you know me, I like the truth, no matter how it's stretched, so to speak. And she was like, if you guys are the Israelites, and they know we're the Israelites, and she was like, well, we owe it to you. She said, we owe it to you. I mean, that's a proud statement, saying that against the children of God. But then again, she's right. Deuteronomy chapter 28, more prophecy, verse 64. It says, and Yahweh shall scatter those among Salak, and the Lord Yahweh shall scatter you, the Israelites, the southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom, you so-called Indians and Africans and Indians. It says, among all people, from one end of the earth until another end, and there thou shalt serve the other gods. This is why you niggas call yourself Muslims and Buddhism and Muslim and serve the cobblestone and everything else. It's another reason why you serve Christianity, why you love your white Jesus, and you can't let your white Jesus go, because it's prophecy. But only the elect will be signed, sealed, and delivered. Signed, sealed, and delivered to wake up out of the scrutiny, if you will. It says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth unto another end, and there thou shalt serve other gods, wood and stone, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither nor your fathers or your mothers, for that matter, have known, even wood, Christianity, that cross, that Caucasian Jesus that you niggas love, and stone, that cobblestone. You call yourself Muslim and Muslim. That is the Ishmaelites' faith. That's not your faith, Jacob. Your faith is not Christianity. Technically, that's Esau's faith that's been whitewashed, because it's really who they call Jesus is Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, a Hebrew black man from the tribe of Judah. So that's hijack religion, or hijack faith. And then the cobblestones and Muslim and all of that, that's Ishmael's faith. So you all in shambles, which proves that you are the Israelites, because this is the curses that the Bible state that would happen to the Israelites. I mean, I can read 65. It says, and among these nations, these heathen nations, these Gentile nations, where the Israelites would be scattered through the four corners of the earth, which is biblical prophecy, spiritual prophecy. Thou shalt find no ease, neither shall the sole of your feet have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling mind and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. So this is why you, for the most part, you Israelites deal with what, we deal with on a matter, because it's all fulfillment of prophecy, proving who you are. Everything you go through proves who you are. These other nations don't go through it like the Israelites, which substantiates and proves who we are. We are the Israelites, the royal, regal people. Even these 2/3 sit around, drink, smoke, do wickedness, do stupid things, lost in the sauce, all of that, to the music, to the mindset, to the decorum, to the demeanor, to all of it. It all proves who we are as a people. It proves everything. You are the Israelites in Babylon. And they got a movie that even stated it, where the Edomites said it. You know, these are the he was I forget. Well, it's a movie called Something from Babylon. That's the movie, but I can't pinpoint it right now all the way. But even then, these so-called, tiny tops, as they say, small hats, they put it inside the movies and the shows, and they mock and scoff at the real children of Israel. But they put it in there and say, yeah, these are the Jews the wandering Jews from Babylon. So these devils know who we are. They always knew who we were and are, according to biblical prophecy. And as the saying goes in the world, you can't tell a lie for the most part unless you know the truth. You can't tell a lie for the most part unless you know the truth. And that's just how this cookie crumble. Deuteronomy 28:68 says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. And that's what this doc is going into, how the Israelites were transported through ships. It says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Because if you do the history, you'll know that Egypt is right next to Israel. So we don't need a ship to get from Israel to Egypt, because they're right next to each other. This is how the Israelites were in the wilderness and walking with our forefather Moses and the rest of the forefathers and foremothers, because Israel and Egypt is right next to each other. You can walk into Egypt. So Deuteronomy 28:68 says, and Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again, a second time, with ships. That means bondage. It says, by the way whereof I spoken to thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there you should be sold unto your enemies for bondman, slave man, and bondwoman, slave woman, and no man shall buy you. Of course they was buying us and selling us and having their way and doing everything else they did. And it's great pending judgment for what they done and did and are doing. Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, has not forgot. Everybody got to pay the piper. Everybody has to pay the piper. That's what you got to know and comprehend. Everybody must pay the piper. And who is the piper? The piper is who you call God. So when it says buy you, it means redeem you. No man shall redeem us, but only one man will redeem us. And who is that one man? Well, if you've been following me this far and been following the ministry of other prophets and apostles and scholars and disciples this far, then you should know who is that one man that will redeem that nation. Hamashiach Yahushai, who they ignorantly and obliviously called Jesus Christ, which is a so-called black man, by the way of prophecy, by the way of historical documents, etc., etc. So that's how we're going to be redeemed. We're going to be redeemed by Yahushai, by his blood, in which he already did, but more so when he finally wreaks havoc on this wicked kingdom. That's when we're going to be redeemed. Deuteronomy 28 again, 68, it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spoken to thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there you should be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you, which means redeem you. They were selling the Israelites on the auction block. 25, 45, 67, 88, you know how the auction block go. Selling slave women, slave men, really, well, according to prophecy, slaves, but they're not slaves. They were Israelites, fall into prophecy. So let's get back into it.
And with many expeditions by Portuguese and Spanish explorers, Africa became a major source of supply of slaves to Europe. In the Spanish West Indies, as well as the Portuguese colonies in Brazil, the Indian slaves were gradually replaced by Africans. These Africans were stripped of their identity and occupation. To refer to them as just slaves is incorrect because before being captured by the European, many of them were farmers, merchants, soldiers, musicians, goldsmiths, blacksmiths, and many more. They were husbands, fathers, wives, children, and mothers. They had origins and heritage, but when the Europeans came and took over their communities, they became captives and had to be boarded on large ships and taken to Europe.
So as I believe that's Malcolm, right? And the spirit had me looking at Malcolm X, a couple of days ago, or a day ago, a couple of days ago. And I think he has one of the quotes where he say, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, but Plymouth Rock landed on us. So that's true, right? That's true to some degree.
Enslavers dispersed them across the Americas and different parts of Europe. They were forced to lead lives under terrible conditions and face severe labor conditions. They were stripped and flogged and forced to work very long hours, often under terrible weather and health conditions. The transatlantic slave trade transported between 10 million and 12 million enslaved Black Africans.
Correction. 12.4 million Hebrew Israelites, not Africans, were Hebrew Israelites from the southern kingdom. And then you have the northern kingdom, in which they were talking about the Indian tribes that was here in America. Some of those Indian tribes are Israelites. Go back to certain tribes of Israel. And you've seen what happened to our brethren and sistren when, the Edomites came over via Christopher Columbus, via the Spaniards, etc., etc. History.
The Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. You might have heard of the triangular trade, right? And how Africa was a major part of this trade, although suffering economically, while the other two parts that made up the triangle enjoyed huge economic benefits. We'll get to that shortly. The first slave voyage from Africa to the Americas is believed to have sailed in 1526. But even before this period, Africans were bought as slaves directly from Europe, and even native inhabitants of America were also enslaved by European explorers. Before 1518, the Spanish monarchy.
So there you have it. You have both kingdoms. You have the so-called Africans and the so-called Indians, both enslaved, both put in captivity via through prophecy, because Yahweh said this would happen to the Israelites for disobedience and basically serving the other gods, the heathen gods, Gentile gods, a lot of stuff that our ancestors were doing. Like I said, I can't just put the whole 100% on these heathens, but I can definitely put majority of it on them. So if we're going with an 80%, then the 20% is our fault. If we're going with 90%, then the 10% is our fault. And however you want to split the percentage. We didn't keep our end of the covenant, the contract. And this is why Yahweh, he scattered us amongst the four corners. Let's grab some more prophecy. Prophet Ezekiel chapter 39:23. It says, in the heathen, the Gentiles, all the other nations, so-called Asians, so-called Arabs, so-called Caucasians, so-called Africans, so-called Hawaiians, so-called East Indians, all these other nations. It says in the heathen shall know that the house of Israel, you so-called Indians and Africans, were or went into captivity for their iniquity. It says because they transgressed against me. trespassed against me. It says, therefore I hid my face from them and gave them into the land of their enemies. So they fell by the sword. Prophecy, prophecy, prophecy. Ezekiel 36:19, precept upon precept. That's how you unlock the prophecies, the scrolls, if you will. It says, and I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed throughout the countries. According to their ways and according to their ill doings, I judged them. So like it was like I said, it was our fault to a degree. But even with that being said, you nations, you Moabites, Ammonites, Hamites, Edomites, Cushites, Elamites, Jebusites, Philistines, Hamites, all of you nations are still going to get judged for what you did. See that's a power that you can't fathom. Part 2.